35. Cogs in Cogs. Right before leaving New York and TMF Studios, I ordered and paid for enough recording equipment to fill up the silver transporterome of London. That all arrived in the UK a few days after I did, and it was a pleasure seeing my new space in Limehouse ready and wired for action. I looked forward to working on my songs with Crystal Radio and finding new, exciting bands to sign to Shoplifter Records. At the end of September, Regina Spektor returned to my flat on Devonia Road. Yes, she had been crazy happy when I told her, back in early August, what I had overheard on the bullet train in Japan, and now she had come over to discuss logistics for her real-life upcoming US tour with the Strokes and Kings of Leon. Toby and I invited Regina to play at our 11th Basement Club event, along with my band and a new group called Block Party. Kele Okereke was one musician that Toby L had been keeping his eye on for years. Regina's big US tour was to begin in 2 weeks, and when she showed me that sweet-looking tour itinerary, I started imagining a side plan. I noticed that the Strokes, Kings of Leon and Regina Spektor tour would be hitting Seattle on October 25th, with 2 days off afterwards. I jumped on the phone with Manny and asked her if there was any free time available at Bear Creek, in case I could entice the Strokes out to record on their days off. She said yes, and the Strokes agreed to spend a day trying out a new song. My hope was that once they saw how beautiful it was at Bear Creek and heard how great the sounds would be, that maybe they'd want to record their next album there. True to the plan, I flew from London into Seattle a little ahead of time, both for fun and jet lag removal. I brought my dad, sister Lisa, and brother-in-law Jose as my guests to the big concert at the exhibition centre. I especially thought they would all love Regina. It was a powerfully touching moment for me seeing my 2 wonderful artists, the Strokes and Regina Spektor, play in my hometown in that same space where I had witnessed so many inspiring and influential shows. The day after the concert, I drove out to Bear Creek early to set up the studio equipment, feeling lucky to have the incredibly talented Ryan Hadlock engineering with me. By the time the Strokes arrived in the afternoon, all the tech stuff was ready and all they had to do was set up their instruments, sound check and play. I was happy and surprised to see that they'd brought Regina with them, then became both overjoyed and mystified when Julian told me that the song we were about to record was a duet that he and Regina were going to sing together. A Strokes duet? Oh yes, here we go. They all love the studio and its outdoor farmhouse surrounded by forest vibration. Joe Hadlock built a huge bonfire, one of his many specialties, and everyone was in high spirits. It was surreal being with the Strokes and Regina Spektor in those natural surroundings, so opposite to our usual meetups in New York City. Bear Creek's rare magic was quickly apparent because we didn't have to spend much time finding the right sounds. It only took a few tries to get a great performance from Nick, Albert, Nikolai and Fab, even though the song must have been brand new. Once the instrumental tracks were done, Julian and Regina asked Joe if it would be okay to sing outside on the grass by the tall, wonderfully fragrant cedar and pine trees. Ryan Hadlock brought out 2 of his best large diaphragm condenser mics, placing them so that Julian and Regina would face each other. They stood about 10 feet apart with the studio dog, a big old German shepherd named Ella, laying restfully on the lush green grass between them. The 2 of them singing together was a sweet and powerful blend, and it didn't take many tries at all to capture an amazing performance. Perhaps due to the wonders of Bear Creek, or the novelty of recording a duet, it was rather effortless to finish the recording. The next day, we returned to mix that song, and thus, Modern Girls and Old-Fashioned Men was born, becoming the B-side to the Strokes' next single, Reptilia. If you look on the back of that fabulous record cover, the front image is also wonderful, You can see me with my blue Dealer of the Year parka that Charles of London designed for me, and photos of these New York rock musicians happy together around a farmhouse bonfire. Moses Schneider brought me over to Berlin to work doing vocal security for a rock band with 3 guitarists called Beatsteaks. I was responsible for crafting the vocal tones, recording their singer Arnhem, and making sure that his English lyrics were grammatically right on. To be honest, Arnhem knew very well what he was doing. His words and pronunciation were already great by the time I showed up on the scene. It was a fun, energetic job, and also the most creatively involved I had ever been in one of Moses' productions. That record, Smack Smash, went gold and platinum in Germany and was a breakthrough for the band. Beatsteaks soon became one of the most successful bands in the country. While working at the Berlin Transporter Raum, I received a thrilling phone call completely out of the blue. It was Michael Goldie Goldstone from Sire Records in New York on the line. I knew exactly who he was, even though we'd never met, as he'd signed my Seattle friends, Mother Love Bone, and later Pearl Jam, to Epic Records. He'd also signed Rage Against the Machine and has a worldwide reputation for his music industry accomplishments and prowess. He'd heard the loud buzz about Regina Spektor touring with the Strokes and had a copy of her album, Soviet Kish. Goldie was calling to tell me that he absolutely loved the record and wanted to sign her to Sire. Seymour Stein's Sire Records was Madonna's first label, having already launched the Ramones, Talking Heads, and the Dead Boys, among others. I was exhilarated that this legendary A&R person was loving Soviet Kish, and told him that I'd heard good things about him from both Seattle bands that he'd signed. Mr. Goldstone asked me what I thought he could do to entice Regina to sign with Sire, and I simply replied, "Take her out to dinner and tell her what you have in mind." He did that, and a short while later, after the deal was done, I visited the Sire Records offices at 75 Rockefeller Plaza, the Rock Building, meeting with Goldie and shaking hands with the legendary founder Seymour Stein. My label Shoplifter Records was the first to release Soviet Kish, originally having exclusive rights for the UK territories, but that story has a tragic final act on which the curtain fell much too soon. Also tragically ending was my band's name, Crystal Radio. I got a message from Mr. Dave Davies of the Kinks, telling me that he currently had his own band with that name, and I was strongly advised to change mine to avoid legal wrangling. I felt bitter about that, as I just hired Charles Wallace to design the cutest new Crystal Radio logo, borrowing heavily from the Dayglow yellow and green lettering on Jimi Hendrix's Rainbow Bridge album. Plus, I had my own familial connections with the name Crystal Radio. After filling another 2 pages with scratchy writing in my notebook, I picked a new name, Blacklight. This moniker referred to the fact that my teenage bedroom with its signal orange walls was covered in psychedelic posters which tripped us all out when we turned on my black light, known as UV light in the UK. In my stoned out mind, the name strongly symbolised how black music from Africa and the southern states created rock and roll to begin with. Please see Little Richard, Buddy Guy, Muddy Waters, Chuck Berry, Willie Dixon, Howlin' Wolf, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Cream and Led Zeppelin for details. Our year 2003 rolled on with the Strokes magically reappearing in England on December 4th to perform live on the Jonathan Ross TV show and play 2 sold-out nights at Alexandra Palace, or Ali Pali as the natives call it. Room on Fire had been released on October 28th, the day after our duet recording experience at Bear Creek. That album had been widely distributed within 8 weeks of completion. Super fast. The Strokes toured the US and were now closing the year with a handful of European shows. Regina came to visit me in London at the exact same time, and we went together to see the Strokes play Reptilia on Jonathan Ross and also attended both Ali Pali shows. Regina told me that she was on her way to visit some friends in Paris and would be staying at their apartment. When I told her I'd never been there before, she invited me along. I was very excited about seeing Paris for the first time and loved the idea that Regina would be my tour guide. We boarded the Eurostar for a fast ride into France, staying in the 4th arrondissement close to Notre Dame. Regina's friends were delightful, and the room I stayed in was full of ornate antique furniture. It was freezing cold outside, but as a first-timer, I was enraptured with the visual feast that is Paris, the architecture, the scene, the sky, the people. It was a heady, enchanting trip from the very first moments, but that high energy was further intensified when I was invited by the Doors to see their show at Les Zenith, where, as the pantheons of gods would have it, the Strokes were also scheduled to play the following night. The Doors thing should have been superb. I watched their sound check, then I had a lovely formal dinner with the band featuring white tablecloth, wine and candles with venison as their main meal, something I'd never tried before. Chatting with Ian Astbury and Ray Manzarek in that setting was truly a leap into the beyond. When it finally became time for the concert, I stood at the side of the stage rolling joint after joint, drifting in my own cloud of hashish smoke all night. Sadly, I did not enjoy the show. It was not a great performance like the ones I'd seen in Japan. Ian Astbury sang his parts perfectly, channeling plenty of Jim Morrison's spirit from the next world. I just couldn't stop hating the sound of the digital Korg organ Ray was using. You're the goddamn Doors. Bring some old electric organs and do it properly. Ah! Also, Ray was acting like a Las Vegas entertainer or clown almost the entire time, waving his arm like a circus showman while doing Korg organ solos with the other hand. Oh, and sorry to say, those organ solos were way too long, too frequent, and too meandering for my own intoxicated head. Julian joined Regina and I the next day for some witty conversation and sightseeing. That night, she and I watched the Strokes shred Les Zenith after a nice set from Regina's friend Ben Queller. Christmas Eve was 2 weeks away, and as we returned to London, I was whirling with energy and satisfaction from the incredible year that was nearly over. I'm quite sure that Regina, sitting next to me in the Eurostar, was thinking the exact same thing.